Bonjour! Thank you for joining me today for Princess Storytime. Today I'll be reading from 50 famous fairy stories. Today's story is a new one to me. It's called The Dwarfs. Once upon a time, a rich king had 3 beautiful daughters. About his castle was a wonderful orchard in which all kinds of trees grew. The king had given a warning that whoever should pluck and eat an apple from a certain tree would disappear 100 feet into the ground. When autumn came, the apples on this tree looked so red and juicy that the 3 princesses longed to taste them. Every day they went to the tree to see if any of the fruit had fallen, but the wind blew none down, and the princesses dared not pluck any because of the king's warning. One day the youngest of the 3 daughters said to her sisters, "Our father loves us so much that he will never cause us to disappear underground. He meant that as a warning only for strangers." So she plucked an apple. The other 2 sisters shared it with her, but as soon as they had eaten it, all 3 sank down below the earth. By and by the king sent for his daughters, but they were nowhere to be found. At length, when his servants had searched the palace and grounds and could find no trace of them, the king had it proclaimed throughout the country that whoever should bring back a princess could take her as a bride. Therefore, great numbers of young men set out in search of the royal maidens. Among others, there went out 3 huntsmen who were brothers. After traveling for 8 days, they came to a large castle in which every room was splendidly furnished. In one room, they found a large table and all manner of delicious food. Each dish was steaming hot and seemed fresh from the kitchen, yet nowhere did they hear or see anyone. Since no one came, they ate what they liked. Afterward, they agreed that one of them should remain in the castle each day and take his ease, while the other 2 sought the princesses. To decide who was to stay, they drew lots, and it fell to the share of the eldest to stay at the castle the first day. About noon, a little dwarf brought in roast meat which he cut in small pieces. While he held some out to the huntsman, he let one piece fall, and the dwarf asked the eldest brother to pick it up. "Pick it up yourself," said the eldest brother rudely. The dwarf did so, and as he bent over the brother, kicked him, saying, "That will teach you who is servant and who is master." The next day the second huntsman remained at the castle, and the dwarf dropped the meat as before. The second huntsman was just as rude as his brother, and the dwarf went away shaking his fist. The third day the youngest brother remained, and the dwarf dropped the meat as usual and asked the youth to pick it up. "Gladly," said the youth, "for you have given us fine service," and he leaned over to do so. Whereupon the little dwarf served him a meal twice as fine as any he had ever served before. Then the dwarf said, "You have done me a favor. Now I'll do you one. I will tell you how to find the king's daughters." The little man explained that he was an underground dwarf, and there were many more than 1,000 like him. He also warned the huntsman that his 2 older brothers would try to trick him. Therefore, if he wanted to get the princesses, he must go alone. He must take with him his hunting knife and a great basket in which to let himself down into the well where the princesses were kept. In this well he would find 3 rooms. In each room was a princess guarded by a dragon. Each dragon had many heads and could be killed only by having its heads cut off. As soon as the dwarf had said all this, he disappeared. In the evening, the 2 older brothers returned and asked the youngest how he had passed the time. "Oh, very well indeed," he replied. "At noon a dwarf came in and told me how to find the princesses. They are in the well at the top of the hill." The older brothers didn't believe him, but they thought they might as well search the well, as good as one place as another. So the next morning all 3 brothers went up the hill to the well. They drew lots to see who should descend the well first. The lot fell, as before, to the eldest. He went down, taking a bell with him to ring as a signal when he wanted to come up again. As soon as he caught a glimpse of a dragon, he began furiously ringing his bell. When he was drawn up, the second brother took his place and went down, but he quickly rang to be pulled up again also. The youngest brother's turn came next. He allowed himself to be let down to the very bottom of the well, and there, getting out of the basket, marched boldly up to the first door with his drawn knife in his hand. Inside, he heard a dragon snoring loudly. Carefully opening the door, he saw a princess sitting within. The sleeping dragon lay with his 9 heads on her lap. Quickly, the young huntsman raised his knife and cut off the 9 heads. Immediately, the princess jumped up and kissed him and gave him her golden necklace as a reward. Next, he found the second princess, who had a 7-headed dragon by her side. The young huntsman killed this beast also, and then went to the youngest princess. She was guarded by a 4-headed dragon, and he destroyed it as he had the others. The 3 sisters embraced and kissed him till he thought he would be smothered, so he rang the bell very loudly to signal he was ready to come up. When the basket came down, he put each princess in it by turn and let them be drawn up. As the basket descended for him, he remembered the dwarf's warning that his brothers would try to trick him. So he picked up a huge stone and laid it in the basket instead of getting in himself. Just as the brothers had drawn it halfway up, they cut the cord at the top, and the basket with the stone in it clattered to the bottom. The 2 huntsmen thought they had rid themselves of the youngest brother and threatened to kill all 3 princesses unless they promised never to tell their father who had truly rescued them. Then they went to the king and demanded the 2 oldest princesses for their wives. Meanwhile, the youngest brother was wandering sadly underground and thought he would have to die there. All at once he saw a flute on the wall. "Ah me," he thought to himself, "what good can this be here? No one could be happy enough to sing or dance in this place." Up and down, to and fro, he walked until the floor was worn smooth. At last he decided to make the best of things, so he took down the flute and blew 3 notes on it. Instantly, 3 dwarfs appeared. He blew a little longer, and each note brought another dwarf, until at last the room was quite filled with the little men. They all asked what he wished, and he told them he wanted to go up to the earth again. Immediately, each dwarf seized a hair of the young huntsman's head, and they flew with him until they landed at the edge of the well. As soon as he was safe on his legs again, he set out for the royal palace, and arrived there just as the weddings of the princesses were about to be celebrated. He hurried up to the room where the king sat with his daughters. They were so overcome by the sight of him that they fainted away. Immediately the king ordered the newcomer to be thrown into prison, for he thought the young huntsman had surely done the princesses some injury. As soon as the princesses had recovered, they begged their father to free the youth. He asked them the reason, but they wept bitterly and said they had promised not to tell him. "Well then," said the king, who suspected some evil trickery, "tell the oven. You didn't promise anything about that." Then he slipped outside and listened at the keyhole, while the youngest princess told the oven the whole story. When the king heard the truth, he ordered the 2 wicked brothers to be thrown into prison, but he gave his youngest daughter in marriage to the princess's true rescuer. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I hope to see you again soon. Au revoir!